Proper, authentic Greek pita bread, one of the true delights of this world. Today I'm showing you 2 methods on how to make them, with plenty of chef tips along the way, so let's get started. I'm going to begin by getting my stand mixer, and into the bowl of that I'm adding 100 millilitres of milk at room temperature, 60 millilitres of water also at room temperature, 1.5 teaspoons of dried yeast. I've never had a problem with dried yeast not working, but if you want to be super sure that your yeast is active, then I'll show you how to do that a little later. Half a teaspoon of sugar, 3/4 of a teaspoon of fine salt, optionally a pinch of thyme leaves, finely chopped rosemary and oregano would also be great additions, 230 grams of bread flour, and around 2 tablespoons of extra virgin olive oil. Dough hook goes on, and I'm going to start to mix this slowly for the first 1 to 2 minutes until everything is incorporated. After 2 minutes of slow mixing, I'm turning this up to a high speed. That's a 5 to 6 on my KitchenAid, and I'm going to keep this on a high speed for another 3 to 4 minutes. 4 minutes later, and my dough has fully cleared the bowl, leaving nothing stuck to the sides, and has wrapped itself around the dough hook. To double check that this dough is ready, I'm going to give it the tug test, which is just grabbing a piece of dough like this and pulling to see if it tears. This looks good. If yours does tear, just mix it on high speed for a little longer. Now I'm going to shape the dough ball by just getting my hand underneath it and rotating the dough 90 degrees a few times whilst tucking under. This step isn't 100% necessary. I like to do it because I find it a lot easier to tell when the dough has doubled in size after the proofing, which is the next step. Place a tight-fitting lid or a damp cloth over the dough ball and leave this to rest for around 40 minutes or until the dough has doubled in size. If you don't have a stand mixer, then this recipe is very achievable by hand as well. Into the mixing bowl goes the milk, water, sugar and yeast. At this point, if you want to check your yeast is alive, give this mixture a whisk and leave it to sit for 5 minutes. It is very important that the milk and water are no colder than 22C 72F and no warmer than 30C 86F. Too cold and nothing will happen. Too hot and you'll kill the yeast. If you don't have a thermometer, then just stick your finger in. It wants to feel no warmer than you. After 5 minutes, it should be visibly bubbling like this. Then add the bread flour, the salt and the extra virgin olive oil. I'm not adding thyme to this dough, just for some variety. Now get a strong spoon and mix this until it forms a sticky, shaggy, slightly messy dough like this. Turn it out onto your work surface and sprinkle it with a light dusting of flour and begin to knead. I like to start by rolling around the dough a little bit just to get everything coated in flour and move on to this kind of 3 a.m. dance move. There are so many ways to knead. Do what feels comfortable to you. All we realistically are looking for is to move the dough around so the gluten strands develop and become more elasticated. After 3 to 4 minutes of kneading, the dough has come together and is no longer super sticky to the touch. Whilst kneading, try to resist the urge to keep dumping handfuls of flour on if everything gets a little sticky. Just try to keep the dough moving at all times. This does stop it sticking to your hands and the surface. That's why I like this kneading method. The dough never stops. Once you've developed some gluten, it will naturally be less sticky. If it is impossible to knead the dough though, add flour little by little. I'm going to shape it into a ball, and another good test to see if it's ready is when I give it a prod with my finger, it slowly bounces back. This is ready. Back into the bowl and covered with a tight fitting lid or a damp cloth and leave it to rest for 40 minutes or until doubled in size. Okay, it's been around 40 minutes and my first dough ball has doubled in size. And when I touch it with my finger, it feels kind of light, airy and buoyant. Get some extra virgin olive oil and pour some onto your surface and spread it around evenly. Then get your dough out of the bowl onto the surface using one of these dough cards. If you haven't got one, then get one. They're super cheap and they're handy for so many things. Shape the dough into a cylinder by just rolling it back and forth with your hands from the center, working your way out to the edges. Then cut it into 4 equal-sized pieces using your dough card or a knife. You could use some scales to get perfectly even weights if you want it to be super accurate. Then just shape each one of the portions into a ball shape by just pulling out the edges and tucking them underneath. You don't want to overhandle them at this point. They will tighten up and become impossible to flatten into a pita shape without having to rest and relax the gluten for another 10 to 20 minutes. Now place a frying pan onto the stove and put it on a medium heat for a few minutes until it is evenly hot. Whilst that is heating up, we can shape the first dough ball. To do this, just push from the center towards the edges with your fingers, then drizzle around a teaspoon of olive oil on top. Continue to push the dough into the surface and flip it over to get both sides coated in olive oil. Continue this process, working your way around the edges, flipping occasionally to make sure nothing is sticking to the surface. Once you're getting to the right size, work your way around the edges more so everything is evenly thick. You want it to be about 5 millimeters thick. I don't know how to say this in inches, so roughly the thickness of 2 pennies. Then place it into your dry, preheated pan and cook for around 2 minutes on each side. You want to hear a light sizzling sound straight away, but not too aggressive. Keep an eye on your first one, as you want the heat hot enough so it starts to cook as soon as it hits the pan, but not so hot that it burns before it has a chance to cook through. I have my heat on about a 5 out of 10. Once you're in a rhythm with this, it's quite an easy and fun process. The time it takes one to cook is easily enough time to roll one out. Then just continue this process until you have a stack of pitas. These smell absolutely amazing. They have a crisp outside and a super soft centre. Really easy to do and totally worth the effort over buying them from the supermarket. Alright guys, and that's that. As always, ingredients list is in the description below. Go check out another one of my videos, and I'll see you next time.